Good day. I am Charlene Hayuma, a student of NEGROS Oriental State University SIATON campus. And this is in partial fulfillment of my course Ed 201, Technology for Teaching and Learning 1. At this juncture, I and Marami Kinilitan are tasked to report the continuation of Unit 4, specifically the relevance and appropriateness in the use of technology in teaching and learning. To begin, allow me to read our objectives for this topic.
At the end of the class, learners will be able to know what are the principles of selecting instructional materials, create quality instructional materials based on the principles, and use an objective approach in creating and selecting instructional materials based on the learning principles.
We have been instructed to create instructional materials. I would like to hear from you your thoughts with how you came up with your outputs. Input your answer in the comment section while we continue our discussion. Let us define instructional materials before we proceed. I am positive that you already know about it, while others are still having struggles. Instructional materials are learning materials used to teach. It is also known as TLM, or Teaching Learning Materials. We usually heard this term from Mr. Carlos Cusin and probably from your other instructors. TLMs are gathered materials or collection of materials which may be animate or inanimate objects, human or non-human resources that a teacher can use to teach or facilitate learning to help achieve our desired objectives. There are classifications of instructional materials, namely prints, audiovisual, and electronic interactive. Recently, they categorized into three: traditional, graphic organizers, and teacher-made resources. Our PowerPoints are an example of an electronic interactive. It uses technology. I used the Canva app to create this PowerPoint, CapCut for video editing this film, and for filming my instructional materials. Let's park it there to kick off our discussion. We have 6 areas to be tackled. I will explain the first 3 areas. The rest will be explained by my co-reporter. The first one is appropriateness and feasibility. Let us define appropriateness and feasibility. Appropriateness is the quality of being suitable or proper according to the situation. Feasibility is the state of being easily and conveniently done. Reading between the lines of these 2 words, it directly means that when instructional materials are selected appropriately, this can facilitate an effective learning acquisition of the students. It aids the learners to actively participate in the classroom activities and tasks. It may also further enhance their comprehension of the subject matter when it is chosen and utilized properly. And of course, the material is convenient to do. Therefore, instructional materials must be goal-oriented. It must promote the general and specific goals of the class, setting objectives and a clear roadmap on how you'll reach the intended target is possible if it fits the time and resources to make progress. We can apply the SMART goals in this principle: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. This principle refers to the instructional materials. Being an appropriate and feasible type of instructional materials, it is observed as a design that proceeds at an efficient pace. Since students require time to master a specific skill, the instructional materials must be effective and encouraging for students to practice. This is effective e-learning and face-to-face setup. This principle as well is reminding us to consider students' background as we design the material. In my batch that was 2015 or 2016, if I'm not mistaken, we were taught by Mrs. Portada, my major subject instructor before. To start the class, we must always check our learners. Initially, their learning styles and intelligences. In this way, we'll be able to choose appropriate material, teaching methods, and approaches for our varied learners. Other teachers use the essay type where learners express themselves through opinions or stance regarding a certain situation. Recall that we were initially asked by Ma'am Intea that what is our role as a future educator to our learners. I believe this is her way to get to know us. Also, Ma'am Chloe asked us to write about our childhood reading history. The same with Ma'am Prissy. She asked us to tell little things about ourselves, and Ma'am Anna, who gave us random questions to get to know us. These were the observations I saw from our instructors. Another thing is to consider the vocabulary level of the learners. If you're teaching kindergarten, you are not to say complicated instructions and very deep language. Of course, you have to level yourself to your learners. It goes the same way with being the master or the lady of ceremony. If your audience are old folks, you are likely not to talk about teenage language terminologies like opa or other jargons because most likely they cannot comprehend or keep up. If you're in a barrio setting, of course, you are most likely to talk the native language because not all of your listeners can understand the English language, especially if you have accents. Concepts or the subject matter differ in difficulty based on the year or grade level. Take for example in elementary level, learners are taught about photosynthesis, which is the process of plants making their food. When they reached high school, it became a little complicated. They started to talk about molecules. In college, they talked about conversion from light energy to chemical energy to formation of sugar or glucose. This way, breaking down the topic accordingly is a must, and instructional materials must be understandable and fit to the learners. Methods of development is the process wherein strategies or methods of teaching should be taken into consideration. Instructional materials should contextualize information, but students can relate new information and theories with that what they already know. They can learn faster because they can link their past learning to the present. Lastly, the impact of the materials. Visual aids helps learners establish, explain, connect, or associate ideas and concepts. Therefore, instructional materials must be interesting, enjoyable, and effective. Target learners and instruction. As discussed earlier, we should know our learners and choose a fitting material. However, this time, this refers to the class objectives. We are very familiar with this. Today, we are practiced to create our learning objectives in our reports. That is an example of class objectives. Dependable means trustworthy and reliable. To have dependable materials, we must go back to digging the reality of our source and take into consideration whether it is factual or theoretical. It is important to evaluate sources particularly because A reliable source allows or helps teachers to make decisions that improve the lives of the students both academically and socially. Open discourse, personal reflection, critical thinking, and inquiry learning are student-centered outcomes, which is why instructional materials must be trustworthy and reliable, or it might mislead the learners. Lastly, aside from being trustworthy and reliable, we need to consider if it is up to date and accurate because, again, it will have a big impact on the lives of the students, both academically and socially. Time for us to have a short self-check icebreaker, which is two truths and a lie. I am positive that you may already know this game. However, allow me to provide the instruction for you to follow. To play, you will try to guess which one is the lie among the given statements.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ding, ding, ding! Your time is up. The correct answer is letter C. Thank you for playing. Up next is the continuation of Miss Marimay Kinilitan's report. Stay tuned!
Good day, everyone. I hope you're all doing good. Anyways, I am Marame Ragay Kinilitan. So this is the continuation of our report of Miss Charlene Hayuma. Without any further ado, let's begin. The next one is interest cost economy. IM must catch the interest of the learners. When we say interest, your IMs should be chosen objectively rather than based on the teacher's personal preference or other preference, since your subject learner is your students. Then you must ignite the interest in them because the interest is the most powerful class energize us to the learning and guide academic career, and it's essential to academic success. Also, in interest, you're going to catch the learner's attention for them to get interested of the topic you are going to tackle for them. So for me, it's more on encouraging active learning. Learning is an active process. Students are not able to learn much by sitting on class, listening to teachers, so they must be able to talk about what they are learning about it, write to it, or relate to it to their past experiences, and apply it to their daily lives. And if you are going or using IMs, it must be important to driven your students' interests. As the future teacher, in the classroom setting, we are not the students, we are the teachers, and we tend to access or apply knowledge automatically and consciously. If you select your IM, then do not put your own preference. Also put the interest of the students because in that way you'll expect shortening in the distance of understanding of learners. Students will need to make a learning a part of themselves. So the teacher tried to ask questions to students to relate what they are learning or something to relate. It could be encourage students or to challenge their ideas to the other ideas of the other students. Example of building students' interest in learning is that get students excited about your class by sharing your own excitement about the learning materials. So For instance, you can share with your students your favorite lessons and learning experiences. Also, you can share stories about your own childhood and how you learned to be creative in many ways. Another is make class activities fun and interesting. For instance, you can play a game where you create a song that describes the lesson for that day. Cost. Substitute must be considered first. From its word cost, the goal of using instructional material is to have substitute or is to provide efficient tools for the students. You must consider first or find other alternative materials if the materials you are using is quite expensive because cost or prices is one of the significant variables limiting students to access education. Then we will not use too much expensive things or instructional materials because we can use other things or materials for the reason without compromising the academic standards. Lower cost of instructional materials a better choice than more than expensive instructional materials. It is also saving the teacher's time, saving also your money. You've given a chance to choose between a higher price or a lower price, but then you are projecting your learning outcomes. Then you can choose a lower price learning materials. But then it depends on how your way of finding your learning process or the way you deliver your learning outcomes as long as you provide a right information so there's no need to buy or use too much expensive materials. Or no cost materials are shoeboxes, small and big cartoon, ice cream sticks, old newspapers and magazines, beads, pieces of cloth, and etc. This is also what I am doing in making my instructional materials. The economy now is the money supply and economy increases. So the prices of goods and services tend to rise. That's it for the interest cost economy. Now let's proceed to organization and balance. If you can notice, organization and balance may have similarities if you listen or remember about appropriateness and feasibility that Miss Charlene tackled. IM must be well organized and well balanced in the content. There should be logical organization, clarity, and accordance with the principles of learning such as reinforcement, transfer, and application in learning. So, in the organization and balance, it is clearly stated that your instructional materials should be chosen based on their contribution to the learning outcomes rather than based on the availability. It talks about the content of your IMs, so it will answer the questions if the content of your IMs revolves around your subject matter. Does your instructional materials hit the learning objectives? It is very important since your instructional materials are tools that will be utilizing learning process of the students. So it's very important to consider first the content or the organization of your instructional materials. Taking time to do the preparation for your instructional materials, especially considering the organization, may save time, but then at the end may enhance students' learning. Me as a future teacher will truly promote the content articulate the use of learning objectives and demonstrate a clear path of the learning outcomes. Again, in this organization and balance, it is very important that your instructional materials will provide opportunities for the students to demonstrate practice the knowledge they have and skills, and also to articulate what they learn in your subject matter to the entire environment. Since we teach, we do not just teach about the lesson, you will teach the entire content. So it's necessarily to consider first what you will be teaching to your subject matter, because if it is correctly followed, you will be secure that your learning outcomes at the end will be attained. That's it for the organization and balance. I hope you all understand that. Next is other considerations, environmental factors, and dynamic variables. So in this consideration, the availability of the resources, learning outcomes, environmental factors, dynamic variable, sizes of classes, or attitudes are just among the few to be considered when choosing the most visible and applicable instructional media for effective teaching learning process. As a future educator, we should have the knowledge about the principles of selecting instructional materials so that we can make consideration for making this tool that sustainability and environmental. Knowing this would help us a future educator, or everyone will help a teacher become efficient and effective teacher in the future. So that's it, or that's all for my report. Now I have a questions. Let's do a recap about our report. What are the relevance, appropriateness, and the use of the technology in teaching and learning that we discussed? Timer starts now. So the relevance, appropriateness in the use of technology in teaching and learning that we discuss are first, appropriateness and feasibility; second, appropriateness target learners and instructions; third, authenticity, dependable; fourth, interest, cost, economy; fifth, organization and balanced; and lastly, other considerations, environmental factors, and dynamic variables. Very good, everyone. So that's all for our report. Thank you for listening attentively. Keep safe and God bless.